Kent County Council, the largest local authority in Britain, has found itself at the centre of a rather unique controversy. Normally, people think of councils as being part of the public sector. In other words, away from the commercial, for-profit world of the usual business activity. But KCC has decided to set up some commercial activities, which has rather put up the hackles of local business people. Some of the activities that KCC is now involved in, for example, recruitment and bus and coach services, have been said to be rather anti-competitive, because KCC, of course, is a large factor in the local market. Recently, there was a debate between people from the private sector and people running the KCC commercial activities. It was an interesting one. It was a very civilised one. And at the end, it's possible that people were coming away with the impression that KCC might be looking at its commercial activity and how far it will be going into the commercial activities, and how far perhaps local private companies might collaborate with KCC.
Well, this has been going on for a long time. I suppose, first of all, it was landscaping, and that was around mowing school playing fields and verges and so forth. But I suppose the seminal moment was about 8 or 9 years ago, when we were facing a 25 to 35% increase in bus costs for home-to-school transport. And that was just not affordable, and we had to look at other ways, and we had a bit of lateral thinking as to how could we make sure that we could contain the costs within the county council. And that's when we started to lease our own buses and actually to provide the service ourselves within commercial services. I want to retain a degree of flexibility, that when a market is mature enough, then we don't need to intervene within the market. We don't need to intervene within the adult social care market, for example. 85% of that work is outsourced to the private sector. It's a market where we have very good relationships with our providers, and that works extraordinarily well. And I can see us developing and changing markets and perhaps working more in partnership with the private sector, rather than the private sector thinking that it's a threat to them. It's not a threat to them, but the underlying principle for me is to make sure that we provide value for money for the Kent County Council taxpayers.
I think the main issue is that I don't think anyone has a problem with them procuring best value for the council if they are using services internally. It's where they then take the intellectual capital of those people that have come to them and then are selling it out into the market again at prices that appear to be manifestly below the market rate. Employment agencies are very competitive, and it seems rather strange that they actually want to enter a market where actually returns aren't that brilliant. That's what I find really strange.
Well, we're there really to try and help regulate some of the markets. The bus market was not mature. There were very few operators, and so there wasn't the degree of competition that we felt was appropriate. Similarly, in other markets, they weren't that developed, and therefore we didn't feel that there was that competitive element that we felt provided best value for the council taxpayers in Kent. That's why we've intervened. As circumstances change, then of course we will change. It's not our role to necessarily to try and compete with the private sector. Our whole focus is about delivering value for money for the taxpayers of Kent.
They have a remit where they are allowed to compete on level terms. What doesn't seem to be clear here is whether they are on those level terms. I think, as I said earlier, I don't think anyone can genuinely be concerned about competition, because those people are in a competitive market anyway. But they're not sure that they're competing fairly. And I think everything that we've explored this morning suggests that people don't know, and they're not able to tell, and the council isn't making life, it's all easy for them to find out. It's almost as though there is not a code of silence, as it were, but it feels a bit like that.
Yeah, so you think there should be more transparency?
Oh, without question, without question.
Yes.
They're operating a number of commercial activities, some of which are through an independent company that files its accounts and for ideally everyone could see what's going on.
Yes.
But a lot of the activity isn't. It's still within the body of KCC, and therefore the company that wants to compete can't find a set of accounts and say, what am I competing against?
Yes.
They just don't know.
There are a lot of councils that look on with some degree of envy as to how we've contained, for example, our bus costs. Because for all councils who have to transport children from home to school, it's an enormous amount of money. I mean, for Kent, it's some 20-odd million pounds, so it's a large amount of money. And they want to learn from us as to how they can contain those costs. It's not always about just intervening with one's own vehicles, but how you can structure relationships with the private sector to really get the best working relationship between yourself as the council and the private sector.
My feeling is that the guys who are here this morning from KCC probably got a fairly sharp wake-up call. I think they've been a bit blasé about it, and some of the people I know who are here today have had correspondence which has been somewhat dismissive of the whole idea. That's what I think they may have got a very strong message today, and I hope that they will work out how they can be more transparent in what they do.